Not every rifle that deserves respect ends up on the posters or in the movies. Some got buried under bad timing, others just lived too long in the shadow of bigger names. But here's the truth. There are semi-auto rifles out there that can still hold their own, maybe even outclass the icons, and they barely get talked about. We're not just talking museum pieces. Some of these rifles were battle-proven, others were hunting favorites, and a few were way ahead of their time. If you're a collector, a shooter who loves digging into history, or just somebody who appreciates guns that punch above their reputation, this list is for you. So let's shine a little light on the underrated side of semi-autos. Here are 8 rifles that deserve way more respect than they ever got. Number 8. The 1941 Johnson Rifle. Most people know the M1 Garand as the American semi-auto of World War II, but right there in its shadow was the 1941 Johnson. And honestly, this rifle had some ideas that were way ahead of its time. Instead of the Garand's en-bloc clips, the Johnson ran a side-loading rotary magazine. That meant you could top it off with loose rounds or stripper clips anytime, even with rounds still in it, a huge advantage in the field. It also had a quick change barrel system, something you didn't see again until decades later on modern rifles. The action was unique too. It used a short recoil system where the barrel itself moved back with the bolt before unlocking. It worked, but it did mean the rifle was a little more sensitive to how it was shouldered, and it had more moving parts than the Garand. The U.S. military never fully adopted it. Timing killed it. The Garand was already rolling off assembly lines, and there was no way they were going to retool for a second semi-auto service rifle, but that didn't stop the Johnson from seeing action. Some Marine raiders and paratroopers carried them in the Pacific, and they spoke highly of the rifle's handling. What makes the Johnson fascinating is its influence. Melvin Johnson's rotating bolt design went on to inspire Eugene Stoner's AR-10, which of course led to the AR-15 and M16. In other words, pieces of this underdog rifle live on in America's most famous platform. Today, it's more of a collector's piece, rare on the firing line, but shooters who've tried one often say the Johnson felt surprisingly modern for a rifle from the early 40s. It might not have beaten the Garand, but it sure deserves more respect than it usually gets. Number 7. The Daewoo K2. Most shooters in the U.S. haven't even heard of the Daewoo K2, and that's a shame because this rifle really is the best of both worlds. It blends the familiar ergonomics of an AR with the rugged, piston-driven reliability of an AK. It runs a long-stroke gas piston, but keeps controls that feel natural if you're used to an AR-15. Chambered in 5.56 NATO, it fits right into the global standard for modern rifles. And it's not just theoretical. South Korea adopted it as their main service rifle, and it's been serving for decades. One thing that stands out is the folding stock. You don't usually get that on an AR without an adapter, but the K2 came that way out of the box. It makes the rifle compact and easy to carry in vehicles or tight spaces. Exactly what soldiers needed. Reliability-wise, it's built like a tank. The machining is solid, and guys who've run them talk about how balanced they feel, how smooth the action cycles, and how little drama there is compared to some rifles that are way more famous. So why doesn't it get more respect? Timing. By the time the K2 showed up, the AR-15, M16, and the AK had already locked down most of the world's military contracts, and Daewoo never really pushed it on the civilian market overseas. Outside of South Korea and a few small buyers like Nigeria, it barely got traction. But make no mistake, if you ever get your hands on a K2, you'll see why it deserves way more attention. It's one of those hidden gems that quietly proves you don't need a big name to deliver performance. Number 6. Remington Model 8. When you talk about semi-auto rifles that paved the way, the Remington Model 8 has to be on that list. John Browning designed it back in 1906. Think about that. Over a century ago, hunters could already buy a reliable autoloading rifle off the shelf. It used a long recoil system where the barrel and bolt travel rearward together before the bolt cycles forward. Watching one run is wild because you actually see the whole barrel move back with each shot. For shooters used to modern gas systems, it feels almost alien. But it worked. The Model 8 was chambered in proprietary rounds like 25, 30, and 35 Remington. That limited its long-term popularity, but back then it gave hunters a serious edge. Instead of working a bolt or lever, you just kept pulling the trigger, and the rifle did the rest. It wasn't just a hunting rifle either. Law enforcement picked it up too. The most famous example? Frank Hamer, the Texas Ranger who took down Bonnie and Clyde, carried a Model 8. That single fact alone should have secured its place in history. Here's the thing. It never got mass military adoption, and its unique calibers kept it from mainstream fame. But for its era, it was a trailblazer. The Model 8 showed the world that a semi-auto rifle could be rugged, reliable, and practical in the field. Today, collectors chase them down, and anyone lucky enough to shoot one usually walks away impressed at just how forward-thinking Browning was. Modern rifles might overshadow it in performance, but if you trace the family tree of semi-autos, the Model 8 sits right near the root, and it deserves way more credit than it gets. Number 5. H&K G3. The HK G3 is one of those rifles that never really got the love it deserves in the US, but worldwide. It's been a workhorse for decades. Chambered in 7.62 NATO, this thing was built to punch through barriers, hold accuracy at distance, and survive in conditions that would choke a lot of more delicate rifles. The heart of the G3 is its roller-delayed blowback system. That design gives it a distinct recoil impulse, more of a snap than a push, and yeah, it can make fast follow-ups a little tricky. But the trade-off is raw simplicity and reliability. Fewer gas parts, less to foul up, and a rifle that just keeps running. Sure, it feels heavier than your modern lightweight carbines, and lugging around 7.62 mags adds to the load. But when you need reach and power, the G3 delivers. That's why so many militaries and paramilitary forces kept it in service long after shinier designs came along. In mountainous terrain or anywhere long shots are the rule, the G3 earned its respect the hard way. Another thing folks forget, the G3 has adapted. Modern rail systems, collapsible stocks, and upgraded furniture have kept the platform relevant. It's not stuck in the Cold War. You can actually bring a G3 up to modern standards pretty easily. So yeah, it might not get the spotlight in America like the M14 or the FAL, but globally, the G3 is one of the most underappreciated rifles ever built, rugged, powerful, and still respected, where it counts. Number 4. FN-49. The FN-49 is one of those rifles that slipped through the cracks of history. Built by Fabrique Nationale right after World War II, it was meant to be Europe's answer to the semi-auto battle rifle. On paper, it had everything going for it. Reliability, solid machining, and chamberings in everything from 7.57 Mauser to 30.06 and even 7.92 Mauser. And yet, it never became the household name that the FAL or the Garand did. Timing killed it. By the time FN started marketing the 49, the big powers had already standardized their rifles. Instead, the FN-49 got scattered around the world. Egypt, Venezuela, Luxembourg, Belgium, each running their own calibers. That patchwork adoption kept it from building the reputation it really deserved. Mechanically, though, the FN-49 is a tank. It uses a tilting bolt system, it runs clean, and it's accurate for a full-power battle rifle of its era. A lot of shooters compare its feel to the CFN family, heavy but smooth, with that old-world craftsmanship FN was known for. Collectors who've shot them often say the FN-49 feels like the missing link between WA2 rifles and the FAL, and that's a fair take. It had the bones of a modern battle rifle, but showed up just a few years too late to dominate the market. Today, it's one of those rifles that serious enthusiasts hunt for at auctions or gun shows. Not because it's famous, but because it's a gem. Underappreciated in its day, but a piece of history that proves FN has been building world-class rifles long before the FAL stole the spotlight. Number 3. Winchester Model 100. Back in the early 1960s, Winchester dropped the Model 100 into a market that was hungry for semi-auto hunting rifles. On paper, it had everything hunters wanted: chamberings in .308, .243, and even the less common .284 Winchester. That lineup meant it could handle deer, elk, and just about anything in between. What shooters loved was the way it handled. It wasn't nose-heavy like some other semi-autos of the day. The balance was right. The stock was nicely contoured, and it felt natural in the hands of folks who grew up on bolt-actions or lever guns. Add in a gas system partly inspired by the M14, and you got a rifle that was surprisingly accurate for its class. So why didn't it become a classic like Remington's 742? A couple of reasons. First, Remington pushed marketing hard and offered a .30-06 chambering, which hunters in the U.S. already trusted. Winchester skipped that caliber, and it cost them buyers. Second, there was a recall years later over firing pin issues. The fix wasn't complicated, but anytime you attach the word recall to a rifle, its reputation takes a hit. Even so, the Model 100 still has a loyal following. Owners brag about sub-MOA groups and smooth triggers, even decades after production ended. Some hunters say it's one of the best handling rifles Winchester ever built. Today, it sits as a collectible more than a mainstream choice, but in terms of design and shootability, the Model 100 deserves way more respect than it gets. Number 2. MAS 4956. France doesn't get much credit in the rifle world, but the MAS 4956 deserves more respect than it usually gets. Designed right before France shifted towards select-fire assault rifles, it was a no-frills semi-auto battle rifle built to survive tough conditions. Mechanically, it used a direct impingement system, gas straight to the bolt carrier, which meant fewer moving parts. Now, some shooters hear direct impingement and think finicky, but the MAS 4956 ran surprisingly smooth. Field stripping it was simple, and there weren't a lot of little springs or pins to lose in the dirt. Chambered in 7.5 French, it never caught on globally like .308 or .762 by .39, and that's one reason it stayed under the radar. But with good ammo, the 4956 was accurate, balanced, and had very manageable recoil. It wasn't flashy, but it did the job. Troops who carried it appreciated the simplicity. Solid controls, a rugged design, and reliability in the mud and dust. It even had grenade launching capability built in, something most folks forget about. The reason you don't hear about it much today is timing. By the time the MAS 4956 came along, the world was moving toward lighter assault rifles, and France itself soon shifted to the FAMAS. That left the 4956 as a kind of forgotten step in the evolution of French small arms. Collectors love them now, and shooters who've tried one usually walk away impressed. It's one of those rifles that proves you don't need hype to be effective. You just need good engineering. Number 1. Ruger Mini 14. The Ruger Mini 14 has been around since the 1970s, but it never quite got the spotlight it deserved. Why? Because it was born into the shadow of the AR-15. And yet, this little rifle carved out its own place. And it's still respected by ranchers, law enforcement, and anyone who values a simple, reliable semi-auto. Chambered in .223 Remington, the Mini 14 shrinks down the M14 design into a handy carbine. Woodstock, Garand-style action, and a short-stroke gas system. It feels classic in the hands, especially for folks who don't love the black rifle look. That traditional style is exactly why some buyers pick it over an AR. It looks less tactical, but it still gets the job done. The Mini 14 has served in police departments, prisons, and even military forces around the world. And while the early models got a reputation for mediocre accuracy, Ruger fixed that with heavier barrels and better machining. Today's Minis can shoot tight enough groups for varmint control or defensive work without breaking a sweat. Another reason it's underrated? Legal climates. In states where AR-15s get targeted by restrictive laws, the Mini-14 often slips through because of its more traditional appearance. That makes it a dependable option for shooters who need a semi-auto rifle without the legal headaches. Bottom line, the Ruger Mini-14 may never replace the AR in modularity or aftermarket support, but it's a rugged, straightforward rifle that stood the test of time. And for the thousands of folks who still rely on them daily, it's proof that you don't need hype to earn respect. And there you have it. 8 semi-auto rifles that never got the spotlight they deserved. Some were overshadowed by timing, others by marketing, and a few just by the popularity of bigger names. But each one of these rifles proved something: reliability, innovation, or flat-out staying power. The truth is, not every great rifle becomes a household name. Some of the best designs in firearms history end up as hidden gems, only appreciated by collectors, die-hard shooters, or the folks who've actually put rounds through them. So here's my question for you. Which of these underrated rifles do you think deserves the most respect? Or maybe you've got another hidden gem that should have made the list. Drop it in the comments. I want to hear what you're running. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with your range buddies. And as always, stay sharp.